Good evening, Council. This is the August 3rd Council briefing, where we have 4 items on the agenda for tonight. If we're not able to get through all 4, whatever we don't get to, we'll carry over to the next briefing and will be placed at the top of the list. We will go for about 45 to 50 minutes and then give all council members a short break before we dive into the 7 o'clock council meeting. So we'll keep an eye on the time as we go along here. The first item that we have is something that was posed to our Parks and Recreation Department going back a few months before COVID-19, and that was to take a look at renaming our city parks, buildings, and facilities, and coming up with a policy for all of those, including streets, some type of a memorial program. You should have received some sample policies that were created by Director Fatides related to that. And I'm going to turn it over to him to walk you through the contents of those policies, and we'll see if council has any direction for us to either make changes or move forward with bringing it to council. Jason, the floor is yours.
So we didn't reinvent the wheel here. Full disclosure, we looked at a number of different cities and saw what they had and kind of pieced together what we thought, would make sense for us. The city attorney did review it as well. And if you've had a chance to look at it, we tried to make both the honorary street designation policy and the facility naming policy kind of follow the same format. And in the cover memo that went along with this, there are a couple of items that, I think we need to get consensus on. But in summary, if we talk about the honorary street designation policy, basically it's very simple. It could go to an individual, a nonprofit, Florida nonprofit organization, or a significant event. And the applicant would either go through one of the council members or come to Parks and Rec and fill out the application with us. We'll take it to the city manager, who will then determine, whether it's worthy to bring in front of council. And, it would be a majority vote of the council based on a resolution. And that's the simple process. If you want to talk about, the content, we're available.
With that, we'll open the floor to any questions from council about the 2 policies that you have in front of you.
I will point out that a couple of the variables that we saw from city to city were, as I mentioned in the cover memo, one of them is the term of the honorary street name. Some cities had it for 1 year, some had it for 10 years. We proposed 5 years just as a discussion point. Also, the number of streets that we would allow to be named honorary streets on an annual basis. Some cities had where they allowed 1 council member to bring a nomination per year or 2 per year. We've not really included that in the draft policy. And then the other thing that we talked about in the original meeting, I think back in March, when you guys brought this to us, was where do we place the sign? Do we place it below the actual street sign, or do you want to put it in the right of way, so it's not confusing for emergency responders? And that's really the main variable. The other thing is also the color of the sign. Some cities have them dark brown and or blue and so forth. It just should be different to our current green and white.
And Jason, I think the last one that you have on there is probably pretty important as well, which is the naming restriction to deceased honorees only.
Yeah, and I was holding that for the facility one, Mike.
Gotcha. I see some hands are already raised. The first one up is Councilor Doherty.
Thank you. I just had a hypothetical. The process is for somebody to approach a council member or to go through Parks and Rec. Is there any procedure for the residents just say, for example, somebody wanted to change the name of a street, and do the residents get input before a council meeting, or are we going to include that as part of the procedure?
So we're not talking about changing the name of the street. So it's, we don't want to confuse the current residences or businesses. So they'll remain the same. So,
Okay.
and what we proposed, as you can see in the policy, is just one block on that street. And we typically like it for that honoree to have some association with that street or that vicinity. But to answer your question, it would be in a formal council meeting by resolution. So I guess, the neighbors could come and have some input at that time.
Okay, yeah, I think I misspoke by saying rename the street. I meant just adding the street name. I mean, the reason I bring it up is just because in today's political climate, names can be quite controversial. So, I mean, I think it's good that we're going to give everybody the chance to speak their mind before voting on such a thing or making that decision. So thanks for answering the question.
Next up with their hand raised is Councilor Golding.
Just wanted to ask a question about the one city block. Seems to me that could be kind of, I don't know, some streets, like it's very obvious if you live on an avenue, or if it's an avenue, it's in the main grid that we have, between Pimmon Road and 3rd Street, or Pimmon Road and the beach. But when you get into some of these streets like west of Pimmon Road, where Tallwood is like a really long street, it's kind of like, how are we going to determine, what a block is in that particular case?
So again, these are all suggestions. This is a draft policy. This, I guess, would land back with the decision that you guys would make. But to cut it off on a long street, I would say, there isn't anything definitive. Would be at the start of one block and the end of the next block.
Okay.
And Councilor Nichols.
So Jason, just to clarify, the individual has to be deceased if it's going to be named for an individual. I mean, obviously in today's climate, it's, using people could be a challenge. And also, but there's going to be limited to a duration of like 3 years, 5 years. What did you say?
So the duration we proposed was 5 years, and we're asking for council to give us consensus on what you think on that. So again, that's up for discussion and agreement amongst you guys. But to go back to the deceased, that's again another variable that we've thought we need to get consensus on. Do you feel that it should be somebody that's deceased, or do we leave it open-ended so that you can make a decision at the time you receive the application?
Okay, yeah, I mean, I'm open to either. I just, it's more of we're not renaming the streets. We're dedicating a portion of a street and just putting a marker to designate, just to symbolize, just to symbolize. It's not really renaming the streets. The other question is the cost of it for the park benches and some of the other stuff. The people that are doing the nominating are paying that cost. The city is not going to. Is the city planning on absorbing the cost of the signage and everything, or is that going to be part of the people that are nominating the person?
So yes, the cost will be borne on the nominating family or nominee. So the city will not bear that cost. We're asking for $400, which would cover the cost of a sign. And also, should the sign get damaged over that time, would cover the cost of 2 or 3 additional signs. If they go through the application and are unsuccessful, then obviously we would return the funds to them.
Okay, thank you.
Next up is Counselor Vogelsang.
That was my question, Jason. So the 400 is a placeholder. They get that back if it's not approved.
That's correct.
And then I prefer deceased just because I don't want the perception of favoritism in political world of somebody saying and the council approving somebody that after it just looks political sometimes when things get done. And I don't think that perception's great. And you really can't do that when somebody's deceased. So I would prefer it be a deceased person.
Yeah, and then, if the council are going to go in that direction, we need to perhaps specify at what point after they become deceased do we allow them? Do we wait a year, or is it 2 years, or is it 6 months? Again, that's something for your consensus.
I would just say deceased. I don't think it matters to me.
And next is Counselor Hoffman.
I agree. I think deceased without a specific time frame, because I think I could foresee this being something that people do as in part of a memorial for someone recently deceased. My question along the lines of cost is that the distinction of placing a sign on an already existing street sign versus in the sidewalk seems like it would be a big cost difference, and like put a plaque in a sidewalk would be a lot more expensive, wouldn't it, than just doing a sign on a post?
It would be more expensive, and we're leaning towards shifting towards putting it on the street sign, the post itself.
Okay, I mean, something perhaps slightly decorative. I know there's probably not a lot of leeway there on an official sign, but having it be a different color, either the dark blue or the brown. I think brown tends to go with historic designations. So maybe something that's a little distinctive from a regular street sign would work out well. But I think this is very nicely done.
Thank you.
So maybe we'll just go in reverse order. Consensus on the naming restriction to being deceased honorees only. Sound like there's a consensus on that. Sounds like there's a consensus to go with a brown sign. Seeing some heads nod, that's good. The placement of it being on a sign below the actual street sign, but not necessarily a placard in the sidewalk. Good. How do y'all feel about a 5-year term that the sign marker is up? Okay. And the last one being the current draft has no restrictions, but other cities narrow it down to 1 or 2 nominations per council member per year. Would you like to do it? Would you like to have any cap or just leave it open for now? And I see that Councilmember Doherty has re-raised his hand.
Yeah, I would suggest not having a cap. I mean, I don't see a huge rush where there's going to be a lot of people applying, but in saying that, we don't want to exclude anybody as well if there are, extraordinary circumstances. The thing with death is you can't really predict it. So you would hate to, somebody to have missed that. If we went with 2 people or 2 names, then, it could get a little messy. So I would suggest not having a cap on it. Thank you.
Just as a reminder, any policy that you adopt, you can always see how it works for a little bit. And then if you want to tweak it, you can tweak it. That's not a problem. So consensus to leave it open-ended at this point in terms of nominations per year. Seeing heads nodding again. Jason, I think that gives us the consensus on each of the 5 bullet points that were on the cover memo. Are there any other questions that you needed some direction from council from on either of these policies?
No, I think we've gotten the direction we were seeking, Mike.
Okay, great. We'll have Director Fatides work up final versions of these policies and bring them back forward to City Council for formal consideration in the near future. Thank you, Jason. With that, we're going to move into item 2 on the briefing for tonight, which is a Sea Turtle Ordinance update. We do have the building official, George Knight, on the line. We also have the city attorney, Chris Rosio, and I believe that the two of them are going to do a little bit of a dual approach on the presentation of this particular item. So I'll turn it over to the two of them and let them proceed accordingly.
Thanks, Mike. And we have Matt Sealy. So the presentation for this item is really mostly George Knight and Matt Sealy. Because I wanted to, and I think I promised the council we would give both Beaches Energy and George's department some time to get the ordinance, once the ordinance was in place, to give them some time to take effect from George's perspective in terms of enforcement, well, inspection and enforcement. And then Matt and Beaches had already been in the works for different sea turtle lighting. And so Matt's going to give us an update on that. And George, why don't you go first, George, with your latest in terms of inspection and notification and enforcement and the letter that you've prepared and all the steps you've taken.
Sure. Thank you. And good evening, council. I was, as you know, we started our enforcement procedures July 1st. So we've been at it about 30 days now, or about a month. And so far, so good. We have achieved some compliance out there. It's been a little bit difficult as the ordinance changed a lot from the previous ordinance. And so we have made some strides. We've done some mass mailings. We've done door-to-door, knocking on the doors. We have found that the citizens of Jax Beach, the homeowners, they are extremely receptive to our program, and they are coming into compliance quite rapidly. Actually, it's a little bit surprising to me. The businesses, on the other hand, they're a little tougher nut to crack. So they've been a little bit more difficult. We continue to work with them. And at this point, I'd just like to stress that it's more of an enticement procedure than enforcement, because as you know, the enforcement actually, 180 days from May 20th. So November 20th before we can actually cite someone and bring them before the special magistrate. So right now we're doing a lot of information and education campaigns out there. And I think, based on what I've seen and the doors I've knocked on, we are making some strides. The Sea Turtle Patrol of the beaches have been really great. We communicate with them almost daily. They keep us updated on any problems that they see. We first started this in July, and we had approximately 12 nests along the beaches. And last count before this storm that we've just endured, this little event, we had nearly 30. So it's about doubled in the first month. And so we kind of focused our enforcement or enticement priorities around those areas where the nests actually are located. And, I'm happy to say at this time, we've not had a disorientation based on lighting. So that's good to know. And we're just going to keep plugging away at it. It's a grueling thing out there day after day to try to get the people to comply. And so far, we haven't had a lot of success at people changing fixtures, but we have had a lot of them eliminating them, disconnecting the lighting, taking the bulbs out. We've actually, along Duval Drive, especially, those people have been great down there, and they've kind of helped out, and consequently, that's where most of the nests are located now. So, as far as I'm concerned, we're doing pretty well with it. The Beaches Sea Turtle Patrol is, like I said, they're elated that the city has decided to come on board and do something that would actually help, with the sea turtles. So we're going to keep doing it. We drafted a letter. We've done approximately 37 mailings so far to individual owners, and I've done mass mailings to the condo associations, which, to be quite honest, most of those come back undelivered. But we keep moving along and keep moving forward, and I think eventually we will achieve our goal.
Thanks, George. And we're going to be sure to get those letters out to the condos associations. And also in the letter, if I'm recalling right, George, if that's the right letter we did, that you provide a link for the recipient of the letter to the FWC certified wildlife lighting approved lamps and fixtures, right? To let that person have information
Yes.
about what lights and fixtures they can use.
Absolutely. Absolutely, Chris. We definitely give them that link. We also make available our time to sit and go over some of those things with them in case they have questions. But there are many, many fixtures out there approved through FWC that are available. But, you know, there again, getting the people to purchase them and install them, that's going to take a little time. We're still in our first month, but we are making some progress. And like I said, I'm happy to say we have not had a disorientation. We had a couple false crawls, which is not unusual, and it's not really attributed to lighting, but those were reported to the FWC, and they're not great, but yeah, they have access to the information, and we're going to make sure that they have the answers to the questions they need.
Mike, would you like to pose questions to George and then go to Matt, or do you want to go to Matt?
Why don't we have Matt present a little bit from Beach's energy perspective?
Hey, good evening. Well, we have some more good news to report. So after looking at a lot of different lights, we actually found one that the Beach Sea Turtle Patrol has approved. It's actually installed right now at the First Avenue end zone, First Avenue South there. We actually, it is kind of a unique mold because it's on our mongoose poles, which are made for the pole goes with the light. So we actually had to do basically a knuckle that sits on top of the pole to actually get it to work. But it is an LED pole. It has the correct wavelength, and it has a low profile shield, which means that in these events like we just had, that storm blowing by, it's not going to actually have any flying debris or anything like that. And the Beach Sea Turtle Patrol has approved the light and to leave it on, which is good because it actually identified this light to turn off because of a nest in proximity. And they said it's okay to leave on. And so the next part for us is, Mr. Smith, if you don't mind just, you know, kind of taking a look at it when you can in terms of, you know, the brightness and things like that from a public perspective. We can actually put 2 of these lights on there. So because of the low wavelength that's necessary, you get about 25% of the light output. So we really worked hard with the vendors and whatnot to maximize the light output with an LED. And then that's really tricky to do. And so we can actually do it where we can put 2 of these just to, that way we can have a little bit more. So after that, it's just mainly talking financing. And, you know, if the police department and public is good with it, we can actually look at changing out all the end zone and basically all of those identified by that survey in 2019 that could potentially be seen from the beach.
And the nice part about the shielded lights that Matt is referring to is that it's not a large obtrusive shield that's actually mounted to the light. Each individual LED photo cell on the bottom of the fixture has its own micro shield. So it looks like a standard Cobra headlight from the street, which is really nice. Does Tom have any
And
questions?
Matt, you've had successful tests with all of those lights and fixtures, right?
We only have the one. Just it took us about 7 weeks, I think, to actually get everything manufactured and fabricated for this. And yes, so we have one currently that we are happy with from an internal perspective, and you know, gets public perception. And again, it'll probably be a little bit more expensive than if you were just actually deploying LED lights, just because it's a very unique application. But this is the first of its kind, you know, that's completely Sea Turtle with the shield, the wavelength and everything. There are other Sea Turtle approved lights, but again, I would see this being a standard on all coastal communities just because of the low profile shield and everything that it actually does.
Are you able to share with the council what other areas we're going to be making transitions into? What areas where you have lights that you need to switch over?
Are you talking about Sea Turtle specifically?
Yeah, just for Sea Turtle. Yeah.
Sure. This runs basically from 20th north, you know, actually all the way down to MSD and on. So MSD basically put in a request to us to shut off all their lights on the coast. I think it was something in the neighborhood of 17 lights. So we could possibly look at doing that. There's 35 lights that were identified by the survey in 2019 that basically range from about 17th Avenue South all the way up to 20th Seabreeze. And, different lights, basically all the end zones, and even a couple in that bathroom area, the public restroom area, that were identified as well, that we'd have to try to look at doing something a little bit different, because those are actually the Granville poles. There's a couple of those that were identified. But this light would meet that. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, thank you.
So we've heard from the building official and Beaches Energy. Chris, is there anything you wanted to wrap up with, or should we just turn it over to council for questions?
We could turn it over to council for questions, but just I just wanted to point out that this project has involved probably 10 different city employees and beaches employees. So I don't want anyone to think that it's all me at all, because I got input and assistance from so many different people. Matt was ahead of the game. George has been incredible. Councilwoman Golding, she contributed some important points and got me in touch with important people. So I just wanted to point that out always. This was a difficult project and a massive project, but it took a team, and it's still taking a team.
Councilor Vogel saying your hand is raised, but I'm not sure if that's a carryover from the last item. Councilor Golding.
I just want to say thank you. I really appreciate George's update. It sounds like you're definitely doing a great job working with everybody, and I'm really glad to hear that you're having a really good result as far as compliance goes with the residents. I guess, do you have any thoughts on what can be done to try to gain better compliance with the businesses? And then also, Matt, thank you so much for what you've done as well. Thank you to everybody. This is really good, and I'm looking forward to seeing some successful hatchlings and no issues with those in the coming months.
Okay, yes, ma'am. I will answer that question. I do have some ideas, and just being familiar with how the businesses operate. I visited most all of the hotels along the beach and the restaurants as well. And one problem that I run into during the day when we have working hours, typically there's shift managers on there, which we talk to and relay the information to, but it never really gets to the higher echelon of their management. I was able today to speak with the actual general manager of the 4 Points down there at the 4 Points, one of the violators. And it just takes clawing your way up the ladder. You got to get to the top. You can talk to the lower level people, and you have to go through them to get the appointment with the next guy and the next guy. But eventually you get to the top, and then, you get their attention and you explain to them the importance of compliance and the fact that it is a federal law. It's not only just a local ordinance. And we have some success through that. But in my experience, I just know that takes time. And we've been at it for about a month now, and we've made some headway. But in the future, I expect to 100% accomplish our goals. I do, and we will not give up until we do that.
Councilor Dumont.
Thank you. So am I correct in that the police have not had input into the amount of light for their needs with safety on the test light?
I can take that, Mike. Yes, we have. Sergeant Commander Shaughnessy been on the committee from the beginning. The only problem I saw with the police involved is, be very honest, the police are always going to say it's not bright enough, and they want a spotlight coming from the poles, and the other side is going to say it's too bright. So I finally talked to Commander Shaughnessy. I told him this is the best option. Let's just approve it. I think this is the best compromise of both. I don't think we're ever going to make a street cop happy with the amount of light onto a street. it's just not going to happen. So I kind of cut the process and said, go with those lights. Just
Okay.
my opinion.
All right, thank you. I didn't hear, I thought I heard that, I take him when he said Mr. Smith needed to still, he was talking about you.
You're correct. I was. So this is actually a new light we just got about 2 weeks ago. And so I hadn't had a chance. We just kind of wanted to make sure everything worked out and we could get it installed, and it's been up, and Beach City Patrol was happy. So my next process was to run it past him and just to get his input if he wanted one or two, and to see if maybe that was adequate. And I still feel technology in the future, after the communication and smart street lighting, will be a viable option in the future, just to, do a lot of different things, different possibilities. But for now, this definitely works for the
And we have
from
not
the sea
seen the
turtle
newest one. We have not seen the newest one, to clarify. We've been involved in the process for the last 9 months, and that was just a general statement. We'll take a look at this, and I'm going to take a look at it. And I'll probably speak for the police department, because this, with all this effort, and is this the best we got? I'm good with it. Kind of satisfying everybody. But like I said, the guys involved from my department want a spotlight on every street light for obvious reasons.
Okay, thank you. So the next step is for you to check this out, and you guys give the okay where we're going to be installing them at all the beach ends.
I think number one is that, then to kind of decide if we want one or two, and then, obviously talk financing, because, it will be a significant investment into the lights. I think initial budget's probably, with the modification for the pole and everything, come in probably $900 to $1,200 per fixture. And so that, talking 30 poles possibly, or, 30 lights, possibly more. It definitely is. We just want to make sure that, everybody's on board with it.
Great, thank you.
Counselor Doherty.
Yeah, I'd just like to follow on from what Chief Smith said. This is only half the, we've kind of just solved half the issue. Our residents and our visitors have complained for years about poor lighting, especially in the central business district. So whilst I'm delighted that we're able to protect our sea turtles, I still think we need to put some work into improving the light in common areas, parking lots, and First Street, Second Street in particular. Hopefully with technology, the improvements in technology, this is something that we'll be able to do sooner than later. But I know it's been an issue for quite some time now. I'm sure everybody's noticed in the parking lots specifically, that orange light that we have is almost redundant. So yeah, while we're talking about these things, it's always good to remember that, there's other aspects to this issue. But yeah, I am very happy with how things have worked out so far with the compliance aspect. Thank you.
Matt, did you want to talk at all about the master lighting plan and the work that Beaches Energy is doing with Bill Mann to finalize getting ready to install those lights?
You do want to start the meeting on time, right? No, I'm just kidding. So, right, there's kind of two aspects from a Beaches Energy perspective, and that certainly, now that we have a light that seems to be going along the approval perspective, we'll need to give that back to, the actual CRA and let them redo their lighting study with these in the end zone. So originally they had a different light, and we need to have them basically look at this new one and decide if they want to go with one or two, as well as what we decide. So outside of that, then we'll be working with them, because basically everything else that they've proposed, kind of redoing the lighting, is using our existing standards. Outside of that, Beaches Energy is still looking hard, and really this, over the next 12 months, we're going to be looking at all the LEDs. There's no doubt about it that LED is going to be a thing of the future. Even some of the bulbs that we currently used to purchase, they don't provide them anymore, like metal halide now. It's just LEDs are the only thing available. And so, we're kind of being forced into having to adopt this technology. We just want to make sure that we do it right. And so if you have to kind of change, we just want to make sure that we're looking at all our options with, is there anything better that, instead of just sort of retrofitting what you already have and that look and feel, is there a better option that really makes Jacksonville Beach stand out, among our peers and other utilities and just the community that, again, understand what, Councilman Darty is saying is that you really want to have a comfortable, safe feeling when you come. And so we want to make sure and consider all that going forward.
Thank you, Matt. Councilor Golding?
Matt, can you talk a little bit? You mentioned the pricing per fixture, which that sounds like a pretty steep price. I guess what's behind that cost for each fixture? Why is it so expensive?
Great question. So really right now, this is the only one they make, and they're making it specifically for us. So this one that they've never made before. And there's two things that are really going into it. They do have sea turtle lights, but and there's a lot of technical stuff that, I'd have to have somebody probably understands this a little bit better than I do, but I'll try to do the best I can. Number one, because it's such a wavelength, and I guess sea turtles, basically think about infrared. Infrared is a different wavelength, and it's very close to almost an infrared, I think, is the best way I can understand it. And so the wattage that you can push like into these versus your normal white lights or even like a little bit warmer lights is it's a little bit trickier. And the way they're explaining it to me is the chipset and all this stuff, but it's really tricky to get the maximum amount of lumens you can and the wattage and everything. So that's what they were going back and forth with testing. And so right now it's just because it's such a unique case. It's not what they're mass producing or anything like that. It would be, basically hand making these almost type thing. And so that's what's driving it, part of it. And then the other part is the actual adapter that we need to go on to our current poles. And we are stuck with these poles because of the bulkheads and whatnot. There's no change in the poles and conduit feeds and everything. So, that's the other part. We have to have this special adapter actually fabricated for those poles.
From a life perspective, do we have any idea how long we would expect those lights to last? I mean, if we're gonna be paying more money, can we at least feel like it's gonna last? They'll last for a long time. Yeah.
That's
okay.
exactly what I asked them. I said, what am I getting for dollars per days, right?
And
so far the indication is with the LED that it is going to last similar to what other LEDs do. So, obviously one point we talk warranties and things like that when we get a little more serious down this path, but they're indicating that, there's no less life than other LEDs, which you're usually talking 10 to 20 years, I think easily. I'm saying from my experience, I'll say 10 years, they like to say 20, but I'll say safely, probably, I would think we'd get at least 10 years out of these. I know the LEDs that are on the boardwalk, just because I got involved with the Reason Project, they've been there forever. And it was really difficult to actually find the standards because they just haven't had to change those out. So this should be pretty similar to that.
Okay, thank you very much.
No problem. Good question.
And back to City Attorney Ambrosio.
I just wanted to advise the council that I don't remember hearing George say it, but we also inform and educate applicants at the Planning and Development Department at the desk when they come in, and if their application is for a property in the sea turtle lighting protection area, then they're informed. It's another way that we're doing the public information and education.
Okay. Any other final questions from council on sea turtles? Hearing none, Chris, we have about 6 to 10 minutes if you think you can tackle Chapter 20 parks.
Yeah. So I proposed preparing a Chapter 20, which didn't actually exist. And I've been working with Jason on this, and we've been working with his staff, and also Jason's had an opportunity to review some of it with Mark Evans, and I've had a chance to review with GP. But my suggestion was that we had a Chapter 20 currently in our code that speaks to the parks, but there's nothing in there. So my suggestion is that we have a codified chapter for parks, recreation, and beaches, and I think we need that to help strengthen overall management, regulation, enforcement, and clarity for our departments and for the public, and something that we can actually turn to in terms of a local codified law and set of rules and regulations And Jason and I have been working on that. And there are a couple of particular areas that just really needed to be provided in a code of ordinances rather than maybe just a manual or perhaps some rules that really the public may never be aware of, but also to help strengthen GP's ability to enforce certain problems and issues and concerns that we've had at certain public properties and parks. And I think that we're getting there. This is my first draft of it, but we're getting there. And my ultimately, I'd like to have input from everybody and anybody, but then put this in the form of an ordinance to provide it to council for first reading review. And that's where we're at with chapter 20.
Has council had a sufficient time to look at the draft of chapter 20? And do you feel there's enough time to discuss it tonight? Do you think that you like what you see and want to give the city attorney direction to finalize it? Or would you like it brought back for a more detailed discussion of what's included? And Councillor Hoffman.
Just, I think it looks really good on first kind of scan. Some of the questions that I had were kind of nitpicky, so I don't know if we want to, if we get to that level, I don't know if we'll have time to do that today, or if you want me just to start asking my questions or make, you know.
Yeah, we'd probably be looking for more of the policy implications. Are there sections of chapter 20 that are missing that you feel need to be addressed? Are there areas that you think need to have more detail assigned, but not necessarily the grammaticals or punctuation, etc.?
And also we can change between first reading and second reading. Like I wouldn't expect between first reading and second reading to go clear, cleanly, just with no corrections. So maybe save it for a discussion when we put it forward as a first reading, knowing we'll be making some changes.
That would be fine with me. The only thing that I saw that I felt like might be an area that needed its own section were the splash pads. Do we feel like that? I mean, because I know that the splash pads have kind of a different set of guidelines and management from our end of it, but that was the only thing that I felt like I didn't see.
That's true. Jason, how do you feel about that? Splash pad.
We can take a look at that. I'm not sure that, there are many other different rules that I can think of off the top of my head, Ms. Hoffman, but certainly they do require different maintenance than is normal for the rest of the park, but we will take a look at that.
And I mean, I know that's something I've asked about several times in terms of the opening hours in the morning, as well as the time frame in the year, because I feel like we operate in a much shorter window than I think we can based on our climate. So I would like to see, something put together in writing with regards to that. And the other thing just kind of generally is there are some areas that are stated to be smoke-free. And I wonder if we might consider that being a more global policy for our parks. That's a big issue, maybe too big for this discussion, but just throwing it out there.
That's great. I need to work on that. We need to work on that. Thank you.
Any other policy input from council on chapter 20? So Chris and Jason, it sounds like if we can take a look at smoke-free environment and splash pad details, and then maybe bring it forward for a first reading with council and see what type of direction we have at that point in time. Okay, it is 6:45. Chapter 19 nuisances is pretty much along the same lines as chapter 20. But I'm presuming, Chris, should we hold off on that one until the next briefing? I see a lot of people nodding heads. You're currently muted, but I'll take that as a yes. We'll
I'll do anything council wants.
So we'll hold off on that one. That'll be the first item at the next council briefing, the discussion of Chapter 19, public nuisance abatement. What I believe the city attorney has noticed some cleanup language that's needed amongst within this section in order to clarify it within some other areas of the codes of ordinances and to provide some clarity to our departments that enforce this in particular. So we'll put that first on the next time. If there's nothing else from council, we'll go ahead and take a short break before we all log back in for the 7 o'clock council meeting. So we'll see you all in about 5 or 10 minutes before we go live. See you shortly.